Living from the presence, ordinary. Faithfulness, quiet awareness. Introduction. Some days begin with clarity, others begin already scattered. Either way, God is not waiting at the edge of your focus. He is already here, before the first thought forms, before the body fully wakes, before you remember what you meant to do. This book is not an attempt to turn your day into a spiritual project. It is an invitation to live from what is already true. You are held, accompanied, and loved. And when you forget, you are not disqualified. You are simply invited to return, gently, without drama, to the presence that never left. Chapter 1. God is already here. The room does not become real when you open your eyes. It was real before you noticed it. In a similar way, God's nearness does not begin when you feel aware. It does not rise and fall with your attention. It is steady. It is given. It is as close as the moment you are already living. Many people carry an unspoken assumption that God is elsewhere until proven otherwise. Somewhere above, somewhere ahead, somewhere we reach after the right kind of prayer, the right kind of day, the right kind of mood. But this kind of distance is not the story Scripture tells. The story is simpler and kinder. God is not approached like a locked door. He is received like light. Sometimes our lives train us to trust what is loud. We trust what demands immediate action. We trust what can be measured. Yet God rarely competes for attention. He does not fight the world for volume. He is present in a quieter way, not because he is weak, but because he is patient. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. Psalm 145:18. That sentence does not read like a riddle. It reads like a home address. Not far, not delayed, near. It can feel too simple, almost suspiciously simple, to say, God is already here. We are used to earning. We are used to effort being the price of closeness. We are used to prove it before we relax. But God is not a reward for the strong. He is a refuge for the real. This is why awareness is not a ladder. Awareness is a softening. It is the quiet recognition that you do not have to create what has already been given. You do not have to manufacture nearness. You are not tasked with holding God in place by concentration, as if your mind were the pillar that keeps him standing. The pressure dissolves when we see it clearly. God's presence is not fragile. Your attention can be, but God's presence is not. If you are tired, his nearness is not reduced. If you are distracted, his nearness is not offended. If you are anxious, his nearness is not postponed. The work is not to force the mind into perfect focus. The work is to allow the heart to remember. Some people fear that if God is already here, life should feel different all the time, more peaceful, more spiritual, but the ordinary is still ordinary. Traffic remains traffic. Emails remain emails. The body still aches. The day still carries its weight. God's presence does not erase reality. It steadies us inside it. This is an important distinction. We are not learning how to float above the day. We are learning how to live within the day without being alone inside it. The presence of God is not an escape hatch. It is companionship. It is the quiet strength of being accompanied. And companionship changes the inner posture even when nothing changes outside. The day may still be full, but it can become less lonely, less frantic, less driven by the need to hold everything together, because you are not the only one here. There is a gentle honesty required in beginning like this. We start by admitting how often we live as if God is absent. Not as a confession designed to shame us, but as a recognition that opens the door to healing. We can't return to what we refuse to name. So we simply tell the truth. I forget. I rush. I brace. I try to manage. I live from pressure. I act as if the weight is mine alone. Then we tell a deeper truth. God is here anyway, not waiting for improvement, not leaning away in disappointment, not standing at a distance with crossed arms. Here, let that be the first settling point of the book. Not a demand, not a task. A steady reality to live from, slowly, over time. Chapter 2. Why we live unaware. It happens without malice. A day begins, and the mind immediately reaches outward. Messages, concerns, memory, plans. The inner world fills quickly, like a room that becomes crowded before you realize anyone entered. Most of us did not choose this. We learned it. Life taught us to scan for what might go wrong, to anticipate, to stay ahead, to be ready. It can look like responsibility, and sometimes it is. But often it is something else beneath the surface, a quiet fear of falling behind, being misunderstood, losing control, not being enough. When you live under that kind of pressure, awareness of God can feel like a luxury. You might not say it out loud, but the body says it. There's no time. The nervous system takes over, and presence becomes background noise. Yet this is exactly where formation begins, not by blaming ourselves for being human, but by noticing what has shaped our inner life. Distraction is not always superficial. Sometimes distraction is a form of protection. The mind stays busy because stillness feels unsafe. Silence can make room for feelings we have been avoiding. A quiet moment can expose how tired we are, how lonely, how unresolved. So the mind keeps moving. God is not threatened by this. He is not irritated by our coping. He is gentle with what is tender, but he does invite us into a different way of living, a way that does not require constant motion to feel held. The invitation is not, try harder to focus. It is, you don't have to be held together by hurry. This matters because many people hear, be aware of God, as another form of pressure, another thing to fail at, another standard to meet. But God's presence is not a test, and awareness is not a performance. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Notice what the verse does not say. It does not say, be still and earn your place. It does not say, be still and prove you're sincere. It is more like a release than an instruction. Stillness in Scripture is often a doorway back to reality. Not a dramatic silence, but a small interior unclenching. A moment when the body is allowed to stop bracing, a moment when the soul remembers it is not alone. We forget what is true because we live inside a flood of impressions. The urgent feels more real than the eternal. The visible feels more real than the unseen. The immediate feels more real than the faithful presence of God. But what feels real is not always what is most real. If you want a compassionate explanation for why awareness fades, you could say it like this. We are finite. We can only hold so much in focus, and life is heavy. That is not a moral failure. It is a limitation, a human limitation God understands from the inside, because Jesus lived it from the inside. He knows what it is to be hungry, interrupted, misunderstood, pressed by crowds, asked for more than a body can give. So God does not approach our unawareness with scolding. He approaches it with invitation, not, how could you forget, but, come back. And even that invitation is gentle because he knows how easily we turn an invitation into another burden. So this chapter does not ask you to monitor yourself all day. It simply asks you to see what is happening. Awareness grows more easily when we stop treating our humanity as a problem and start treating it as a place where God meets us. Chapter 3. Returning without shame. There is a moment many people know well. You suddenly realize you have been living on your own, rushed, reactive, tense. Not because you meant to, but because the day carried you. And then comes the second moment, what you do with that realization. Some people turn it into accusation. I'm failing. I'm inconsistent. I'm not spiritual enough. Others try to fix it with intensity, as if a stronger prayer could make up for lost hours. Both responses make return feel heavy, but return is meant to be light. Return is the movement of a heart toward home, not the payment of a debt. If shame has been part of your spiritual life, you may have learned to approach God with a lowered head, as if you must prove remorse before you are received. As if God's nearness is delicate, easily withdrawn. As if distance is the penalty for distraction. This is not the posture of the gospel. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. Hebrews 4:16. Confidence does not mean bravado. It means you are not walking toward rejection. It means you are not negotiating access. It means grace is not a trap. Grace is the atmosphere of return. One of the quietest acts of faith is returning quickly without self-punishment. It says, God is kinder than my inner critic. God is more stable than my mood. God's love is not measured by my consistency. Return can be as small as a breath that becomes a prayer. A pause at the sink, a half-second of inward turning, a simple recognition, you are here. If you can do that, you have returned, and if you can't do it cleanly, if your mind is noisy, if your feelings are tangled, return anyway. Return with whatever you have. God does not require a tidy entrance. Sometimes people resist return because they believe it won't count unless it's long. They think, if I can't give God 10 minutes, why bother with 10 seconds? But the spiritual life is not measured like that. A 10-second return is not an insult. It is an opening. It is a way of living that says, God belongs in this moment too. And over time, moments accumulate, not as achievements, but as a pattern of companionship. You begin to live from a different center. The goal is not to never drift. The goal is to become someone who returns. This chapter is not permission to be careless. It is permission to be human in the presence of God. Shame tells you to hide until you improve. Grace tells you to come close so you can be formed. Return is not a reward for the disciplined. Return is the path by which discipline becomes care rather than control. The heart learns slowly that God is safe. So when you notice you've been away, practice the simplest thing. Don't add weight. Don't write a harsh story about yourself. Don't make a vow that you must keep to feel accepted. Just come back, and if you forget again, come back again. This is not failure. This is formation. Chapter 4. Attention as alignment. A compass does not create north. It simply aligns with what is already true. Attention in the spiritual life works in a similar way. We are not generating God's presence by focusing. We are aligning with the presence that is already there. This changes the feel of attention. It becomes softer, less strained, less like trying to hold water in your hands. Attention becomes an act of trust, not trust in your ability to concentrate, but trust that God is steady even when you are not. Some attention is forced, and it leaves you tired. It is the attention of someone trying to control outcomes, trying to keep the day from collapsing, trying to stay ahead of pain. But there is another kind of attention, the kind that rests, the kind that opens, the kind that says, I am here and you are here. This attention is not sharp. It is gentle. It does not narrow the world into a point. It widens the soul into a calmer space. And because it is calm, it is sustainable. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you. Isaiah 26:3. Steadfastness here is not rigid fixation. It is a settled leaning, a willingness to return the mind, again and again, to God's care. Peace in that verse is connected to trust, not to flawless focus. This is important because many people try to use attention as control. They try to force peace. But peace comes as a fruit, not as a product. Attention is simply a doorway. You might notice how often your attention is pulled by imagined futures, conversations that haven't happened, problems that might arise, things you fear you won't handle well. The mind rehearses, and the body tightens, as if rehearsal could prevent pain. Then, in a small moment, you remember, I am not alone in the future I'm imagining, and I am not alone in the moment I'm living. That remembrance realigns you, not into denial, but into companionship. Attention. As alignment means you can practice it in ordinary places without ceremony. A stoplight, a hallway, a kettle boiling, a moment before speaking, a breath between tasks. You are not performing spirituality. You are returning to reality, and reality includes God. The more often you do this, the more natural it becomes. Not because you get better at it, but because your inner world learns a new default, not constant hyper-awareness, not self-monitoring, just a steady, quiet leaning toward God. That is attention in its truest form, not effortful watching, but gentle alignment. Chapter 5. Carrying God. Into ordinary moments, some people expect God to meet them only in set-apart places. Quiet rooms, planned times, special feelings. But the heart is not formed only in set-apart places. It is formed in repetition, in the ordinary, in the places we return to daily. The question is not whether God is present in ordinary moments. The question is whether we will live as if we are alone in them. Ordinary moments can feel too small to matter. Folding laundry, making a meal, answering the same question again, standing in a queue, driving a familiar route. Much of life is made of unremarkable minutes, and yet a life is made there. If God is only included in the remarkable, we will miss Him most of the time. But if God is welcomed into the ordinary becomes a place of slow transformation, not transformation through grand insights, but transformation through companionship. Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. This is not a demand for religious intensity. It is an invitation to wholeness, to living undivided, to letting God be part of what is already happening. Glory here can be quiet. Glory can be love expressed in a small task. Glory can be patience in a crowded room. Glory can be honesty in fatigue. When you do a simple thing with a softened heart, you are living from God's presence. Carrying God into ordinary moments does not mean narrating the day with constant prayer. It means you stop exiling Him from your lived reality. Sometimes it is as simple as naming His nearness under your breath. Sometimes it is gratitude. Sometimes it is asking for help before your tone becomes sharp. Sometimes it is returning after you've snapped, without self-punishment, and choosing gentleness again. This is not spiritual theater. This is real life with God. Over time, the ordinary becomes less hollow, not because chores become exciting, but because you become accompanied. And being accompanied changes the emotional texture of the day. It steadies you. It softens you. It makes room for patience, and it quietly retrains your inner posture. You are not the sole carrier of your life. God is here. Even here, especially here. Chapter 6. When awareness fades. There are times when awareness feels effortless. The heart feels open, the day feels held, and then there are times when nothing feels that way. You pray and feel nothing. You try to be still and the mind becomes louder. You listen for God and hear only your own fatigue. This chapter is for those times, because they come for everyone. When awareness fades, many people assume they have failed. They assume God has withdrawn, or they assume the whole idea of nearness was sentimental. But feelings are not always faithful reporters. They often speak from the body's condition, from grief, from stress, from depletion. A tired nervous system can make everything feel far away. God is not far, but you may feel far. These are not the same thing. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. That promise does not come with a clause that says, unless you feel scattered. It is a statement about God's character, not about your perception. In seasons when awareness fades, faith becomes quieter. It becomes less about sensing, more about trusting, less about warmth, more about steadiness. This is not lesser faith. It is often deeper faith. Sometimes the most honest prayer in these seasons is not eloquent. It is simply, I'm here, or even, help, or hold me. You may not feel an immediate shift. You may not feel anything at all, but you are not praying into empty space. You are praying inside a presence that surrounds you. The goal is not to make a feeling appear. The goal is to remain relationally turned toward God, even when the inner world is dim. When awareness fades, you might also need to rest more than you need to analyze. The soul is not renewed by constant introspection. Sometimes it is renewed by sleep, by a walk, by silence without strain, by letting the body settle. God is not impatient with your limits. If you are in a season of dullness, do not punish yourself. Do not declare yourself disqualified. Keep a small thread of turning. Keep the door unlocked. Keep returning, even if it feels small. Small returns are still returns, and God is still here. Chapter 7. Faithfulness without performance. Performance is exhausting because it asks you to become your own savior. It asks you to maintain an image, prove sincerity, demonstrate strength. Even spiritual performance can do this, turning faith into a personal project. The result is usually the same: fatigue, discouragement, and a quiet fear that you are falling behind. But faithfulness is different. Faithfulness is care. Faithfulness is staying in relationship. Faithfulness is choosing the next right turning, even when you feel ordinary. It is possible to do many spiritual things while living far from God emotionally. It is also possible to do very simple things while living close to Him. This is why the heart matters more than the appearance. God is not asking you to impress Him. He is not waiting for you to perfect your devotional life. He is forming you in the place you actually live. This means your smallest acts of turning matter. A gentle response when you wanted to react, a return after you've drifted, a quiet breath of trust in the middle of pressure. Faithfulness looks like that. Walk humbly with your God. Micah 6:8. Walking implies pace, not sprinting, not performing, not pushing past your limits to prove devotion. Walking humbly implies companionship, not spectacle. Humble walking includes slow days. It includes ordinary days. It includes days when you don't feel much. It includes the simple decision to remain connected rather than impressive. One sign that performance has entered is when you can't rest without guilt. Another sign is when you measure your spiritual life by intensity. But intensity is not the same as depth. Some of the deepest rivers move quietly. Faithfulness is not loud. It is consistent. It is gentle. It is willing to return without drama. Over time, this kind of faithfulness reshapes the soul. It makes you steadier, less reactive, less fragile, more rooted, not because you tried harder, but because you stayed close. So if you are tired, let yourself be tired without self-accusation. If you are inconsistent, let that be met with grace and return. If your life feels small, let it be small in the presence of God. Smallness is not a problem to him. Performance says, become worthy. Faithfulness says, stay near. Choose faithfulness. It will carry you further than intensity ever could. Chapter 8. Remaining over time. Some changes happen quickly. Most formation does not. Formation is like the slow strengthening of roots. It is quiet. It is unseen. It is steady. And then, one day you realize you are different, not because of one dramatic moment, but because of many small returns. Remaining is how this happens. Remaining is not clenching. It is not forcing. It is continuing. It is staying in relationship through ordinary days, tired days, distracted days, joyful days. Remaining is how love becomes a home. Abide in me, and I in you. John 15:4. Abiding is not a mood. It is a place to live from. And when Jesus speaks this, he does not speak it like a threat. He speaks it like an invitation to fruitfulness that comes from closeness. The fruit arrives in season. The steadiness develops over time. And the primary movement is not striving, it is remaining. Remaining over time means you stop treating your spiritual life like a series of fresh starts. You stop believing that yesterday's failure means today is broken. You stop rebuilding the entire relationship every time you drift. Instead, you begin to live inside the truth that God's faithfulness is the stable ground beneath your unsteady awareness. You will drift, you will forget, you will return. This becomes the rhythm, not a crisis, not a contradiction, but a way of living. There is a gentleness required in the long obedience, a willingness to be formed slowly, a refusal to turn faith into pressure, a quiet commitment to keep coming back. Some days, remaining might look like a full, peaceful time with God. Other days, it might be a single honest sentence. Other days, it might be wordless trust. Do not despise the smaller days. They are still days lived with God. If there is one invitation at the end of this book, it is this: let your returning be simple. When you remember, come back. When you forget, come back. When you feel nothing, come back. When you feel joy, come back. Not to earn anything, not to prove anything, simply to remain with the God who remains with you. That is the long work, and it is a gentle one. Conclusion. You do not have to keep God close. He is already close. What you are learning, slowly, over time, is how to live from that closeness without turning it into effort. The day will still be full at times. Your mind will still wander. Some seasons will feel bright, others muted. None of this cancels the presence of God. The presence is steady, and your life, quietly, can become steadier too. So keep the rhythm simple. Return without shame. Let attention be alignment. Carry God into ordinary moments. Trust Him when awareness fades. Choose faithfulness over performance. Remain over time. And when you forget all of this, when you find yourself rushing again, bracing again, living as if you're alone, let that moment become your doorway back. God is here, and you are welcome.